She married the billionaire for a deal, but what he did won her heart forever. She grew up in that house as part of the silence, and now she was his contract wife. The billionaire said he didn't need love, only convenience. But all it took was one unplanned touch, a glance that lasted a second too long, and the game began to change. She didn't know how to seduce, but she did it just by existing. He didn't want to feel, but it was already too late. Because in the midst of a cold arrangement, something was born that not even his pride could contain, a forbidden, inevitable love, and one that was growing more dangerous by the day. Sorry to interrupt your story, but if you like this kind of content, don't forget to subscribe. Bless this channel by helping us grow, and may it be returned to you twofold. Thank you, and enjoy the video. The Blackwell Mansion stood imposing in Bel Air, the most exclusive neighborhood in Los Angeles. With its stone walls, lush gardens, and windows that caught the afternoon sun, it was a monument to power and wealth. To any visitor, that place represented the American dream come true. For Elena Hernandez, however, it was simply the place where she had learned to be invisible. Elena was just 6 years old when her mother, Sophia, began working as a housekeeper for the Blackwells. The initial agreement was simple. Sophia cleaned, cooked, and kept the enormous house in order, while little Elena stayed in a room in the back, trying not to be a bother, existing without existing. "Remember, my girl," Sophia would whisper to her every morning while braiding her black hair, "in this house we must be like the wind, do our work without anyone noticing we've passed." And Elena learned well. Over the years, she developed a special talent for gliding down the marble hallways without making a sound, for overhearing conversations without being seen, for serving hot coffee just when Mr. Julian Blackwell needed it, without him ever having to ask. She learned to blend in with the mansion's walls, to be a useful shadow, to exist in the margins. At 16, when her mother told her she was pregnant, Eleanor felt the weight of her invisibility for the first time. What would happen to them? Would they be thrown out on the street? Mrs. Blackwell had died years ago, and Mr. Blackwell, absorbed in his business and travels, barely noticed the existence of those who kept his house running. To her surprise, when Lucy was born, Mr. Blackwell barely raised an eyebrow and simply asked if they would need anything for the newborn. There were no questions about the father, a driver who disappeared as soon as he heard about the pregnancy, nor threats of dismissal. Life went on now with one more little one in the back room. Elena, who by then had turned 17, dedicated her life to two purposes: helping her mother with the household chores and taking care of Lucy. The girl grew up amid stifled laughter and quiet games, also learning the art of invisibility, though with less success than her older sister. Lucy had something Elena never had, a spark of rebellion, a light that refused to be dimmed. "Ellie, why do we always have to whisper?" Lucy would ask at 5 years old, while drawing princesses in a worn-out notebook. "Because this isn't our house, sweetie," Elena would reply, stroking her hair. "We're guests, understand? But I was born here. Mr. Blackwell gave me a cake for my birthday." Eleanor would smile melancholically. It was true. In his distant, cold way, Julian Blackwell had developed a strange affection for Lucy. Perhaps because the girl reminded him of the daughter he never had with his late wife, or perhaps because Lucy, with her big dark eyes and easy smile, was simply impossible to ignore. Life continued in this precarious stability until one September afternoon, Sophia didn't wake up from her nap. A massive heart attack, the doctors said. She didn't suffer, they assured. But Elena, at 23, knew her mother had suffered her whole life, carrying the weight of poverty, discrimination, and the accumulated exhaustion of cleaning a house that would never be hers. The funeral was simple. Julian Blackwell paid for all the expenses and even sent a wreath of white flowers. He attended for exactly 15 minutes, dressed in an impeccable suit, and shook Elena's hand with an awkward formality. "I'm very sorry," he said, and he seemed sincere. "Your mother was an exceptional woman." Eleanor could only nod, holding 8-year-old Lucy, who was crying inconsolably without understanding why her mommy would never come back. The following days were a blur of pain and anxiety. Without Sophia, the sisters' presence in the mansion was up in the air. Eleanor took over all her mother's duties, working twice as hard to prove they were indispensable, while trying to comfort Lucy and process her own grief. One afternoon, while cleaning Julian's office, she accidentally overheard a phone conversation that left her cold. "Yes, I have a situation with my former housekeeper's daughters," Julian was saying to someone. The older one can fend for herself, but the little one... No, I can't just kick them out. There's an issue with Child Protective Services. They're investigating the girl's situation. They say that without a proper legal guardian, they'll have to take her into foster care. The cleaning cloth slipped from Elena's hands. Child Protective Services, separating her from Lucy. Panic washed over her like a cold wave. What would she do without her sister? What would become of Lucy in a group home? That night, as she tucked Lucy in, the little girl asked a question that broke her heart. "Ellie, are they going to separate us? I heard the cook say they're coming to get me." Elena hugged her sister so tightly the little girl protested. "No, my love. No one is going to take you anywhere, I promise." But it was a promise she didn't know how to keep. 3 days later, Julian Blackwell called her into his office. At 45, he was a handsome man in a severe way. Tall, with black hair peppered with grey at the temples, and piercing eyes that seemed to constantly evaluate the worth of everything they looked at. "Sit down, Elena," he instructed, pointing to a chair in front of his mahogany desk. "We need to talk about your situation." Elena sat, her back straight and her hands clasped on her simple skirt. Silence. The wall clock marked each second with a tick-tock that seemed to amplify in the tense moment. "I've received a notice from Child Protective Services," Julian began, direct as always. "They are questioning Lucy's situation. Without a legal guardian, they believe the child should be in state custody. Sir, I can take care of her. I always have," Elena replied, trying to keep her voice from trembling. "I'll work more hours, I can find another job." Julian held up a hand, interrupting her. "It's not a matter of money or your ability, Elena. It's a legal issue. You are not her legally recognized guardian, and even if you started the process now, they could take her while it's being resolved." Tears welled in Elena's eyes, but she held them back. She would not cry in front of him. She would not show weakness. "There is a solution," Julian continued, looking at her intently. "I could legally adopt Lucy." Elena's heart skipped a beat. "Adopt Lucy, separate her from her in another way. But," Julian added, and his voice took on a different tone, "for it to be believable, so it doesn't just look like a legal maneuver, we would need to be married." The words fell on Elena like a bolt of lightning. Married? To Julian Blackwell, the man who had barely looked at her all these years, the man who represented all the power she would never have. "It's a marriage of convenience, Elena," he clarified, as if reading her mind. "A legal agreement that would benefit Lucy and allow you to stay with her. You would have my name, my legal protection, and I would ensure the girl receives an education and everything she needs." Elena felt like she couldn't breathe. Marry this man? Become Mrs. Blackwell, after being invisible her whole life? "And what do you get out of this?" she managed to articulate. A shadow crossed Julian's face. "Peace of mind, I suppose. I don't want it on my conscience that I separated 2 sisters. And Lucy..." He hesitated for a moment. "Lucy reminds me of someone I lost a long time ago." Silence filled the room again. Outside, Lucy's laughter could be heard as she played in the garden with the gardener's dog. "Think about it, Elena," Julian finally said, "but don't take too long. CPS will be back in a week." That night, as she watched Lucy sleep, Eleanor weighed her options. She had no money, no formal education, no connections. The only thing she had was her love for her little sister, and the promise she had made to her mother to always take care of her. By dawn, her decision was made. Marrying a man who barely knew her, who had never truly seen her, was a price she was willing to pay for Lucy. What Elena didn't know as she walked towards Julian's office with her heart pounding in her chest was how that decision would transform not only her life, but everyone's in that large house where she had learned to be invisible. The downtown Los Angeles City Hall was an old building of grey stone, with long hallways that smelled of old paper and disinfectant. Elena never imagined her wedding would be like this. No white dress, no music, no blessing from her mother. Just her, in a simple pale blue dress she had bought the day before at a downtown shop, and Julian Blackwell, impeccable in his designer suit, signing papers as if closing another business transaction. The clerk, a man with a tired face and mechanical gestures, recited the legal formalities without emotion. He spoke of marriage as a sacred institution, while his eyes betrayed the boredom of someone who had joined hundreds of couples without wondering if they truly loved each other. "Sign here, Miss Hernandez," the official indicated, pointing to a line at the bottom of a document full of legal terms. "And here, too." Eleanor's fingers trembled slightly. With each signature, she felt a part of her freedom slipping away, but the image of Lucy, who had been left in the cook's care that day, gave her the strength to continue. Julian signed with the confidence of someone accustomed to closing million-dollar deals. His face showed no emotion, only a cold, calculated determination. There were no rings, no traditional "you may kiss the bride." When the clerk declared them husband and wife, they simply looked at each other for a brief moment before Julian checked his watch. "I have a meeting in an hour," he commented as they left the building. "Maria has already prepared your things and moved them to the guest room on the second floor. The one with the green curtains, do you know it?" Eleanor nodded. She knew every corner of that house. She had cleaned that room hundreds of times. "Lucy will remain in her usual room, but we can furnish it better. Buy whatever you need." He handed her a gold card with his name embossed on it. "This is your card now. Use it discreetly." And just like that, without any more ceremony, Elena Hernandez became Elena Blackwell, the wife of the most inaccessible man in Bel Air. The return to the mansion was like entering a place both familiar and strange. The walls were the same, the furniture was in its place, but now she was theoretically the lady of the house, a lady who didn't know where to sit in the living room, who hesitated before opening a door, who flinched when the staff, her former colleagues, called her Mrs. Blackwell. That first night, lying in a bed that was too big, under Egyptian cotton sheets that smelled of lavender, Eleanor cried silently. She cried for her mother, for the strangeness of her new situation, for the fear of the unknown. What did Julian really expect from her? How long would this agreement last? The questions tormented her until exhaustion overcame her. The following days established an uncomfortable routine. They had breakfast in silences broken only by the clinking of cutlery against fine china. Lucy, sitting between them, was the only one who spoke, recounting her dreams or asking if she could watch cartoons later. The girl, oblivious to the marital arrangement, continued to call them Uncle Julian and Ellie, not understanding why they now lived in different rooms, why her sister no longer cleaned the house, why people looked at them strangely when they went out together. "Why do you have to sleep so far away from me now?" Lucy asked one night, as Elena tucked her in. "Because I have a bigger room now, sweetie, so I can keep more presents for you," Elena replied, evading the real answer. "And why does Uncle Julian look at you so much when he thinks you're not looking?" The question caught Elena by surprise. Did he look at her? She hadn't noticed anything, except perhaps a certain tension when they were in the same space. "Adults are complicated, Lucy. Now sleep." The relationship with the household staff was another challenge. Maria, the cook who had been at the mansion almost as long as her mother, now treated her with a formal respect that was painful. Jose, the gardener who had always given her flowers for her room, now barely dared to greet her. She felt like a traitor who had crossed an invisible line. Only Mrs. Rosa, the elderly woman who came to clean twice a week, treated her with the same warmth as always. "Don't feel bad, child," she told her one afternoon, as Elena helped fold sheets, unable to sit still while others did what had always been her job. "Everyone does what they have to do to get by. Your mother would be proud." But Elena wasn't sure. What would Sophia think of this loveless marriage, this union based on legal papers and not feelings? In the midst of this tension, small gestures began to appear. One morning, Eleanor went down to the kitchen and found a cup of coffee prepared exactly how she liked it, with cinnamon and a touch of maple syrup. No one was around, but next to the cup was the newspaper open to the culture section, announcing an exhibition of contemporary American art. Another afternoon, while picking Lucy up from her swimming class, it started to rain with that sudden fury, typical of a California storm. As she left the sports club, she saw Julian's car waiting for them. He got out with a large umbrella and a soft towel that he held out to her. "I saw you from my office window," he explained, pointing to the glass building across the street. "I figured you'd need this." These small details, so different from the coldness of their daily interactions, confused Elena. Was it simple courtesy? A way to keep up appearances? Or was there something more she couldn't understand? One Saturday, while Lucy was watching television in the living room, Eleanor found Julian in his office, surrounded by old photographs. "Excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt," she said, ready to leave. "No, it's fine. Come in," he invited, his voice different from his usual tone, softer, almost vulnerable. "I was just looking at some old photos." Eleanor approached cautiously and saw in the images a girl of about 8, with black hair and a wide smile surprisingly similar to Lucy. "My sister, Isabel," Julian explained, stroking one of the photographs. She died when she was 10, leukemia. The silence that followed was heavy with an emotion Elena had never seen in him. "I'm so sorry," she murmured, not knowing what else to say. "It was a long time ago. My parents never really recovered. My father buried himself in work, my mother in her grief, and I took over everything when they passed away." It was the first time Julian had shared something personal, showing a crack in his armor as a relentless businessman. "Lucy reminds me of her," he confessed finally. "Not just the physical resemblance. It's that light some children have." Eleanor felt a tightness in her chest. Suddenly, the marriage agreement, the adoption of Lucy, everything took on a new dimension. "Thank you," she said simply, "for what you're doing for us." Their eyes met, and for a moment, just for an instant, Elena saw something different in Julian's eyes. It wasn't the cold calculation of the entrepreneur, nor the determination of a man used to getting his way. It was something deeper, more human. That same day, for the first time since their wedding, the three of them had dinner together. The conversation flowed a little more, and even Julian smiled at Lucy's antics. When Elena retired to her room that night, she stopped in front of the mirror and looked at the woman staring back. She was still herself, Elena Hernandez, the housekeeper's daughter, the protective sister. But now she was also Elena Blackwell, Julian's wife, the lady of a house where she had once been invisible. And somewhere between those two identities, in the tense and strange space she shared with that guarded man, something new and unsettling was beginning to be born. Nearly a month had passed since the wedding, and the routine at the Blackwell mansion remained tense but functional. Mornings were filled with polite greetings and practical conversations about Lucy's schedule or the household needs. Julian spent most of the day at his company, and Elena divided her time between her sister and trying to find her place in this new role of a lady of the house that didn't quite fit. That Friday at breakfast, Elena summoned the courage to make a request she had been considering for days. "I'd like to go to the farmer's market tomorrow," she said, her gaze fixed on her coffee cup. "My mum and I used to go every Saturday to buy fresh flowers and vegetables. I think it would be good for Lucy to keep that tradition." Julian looked up from his newspaper, surprised. Since the marriage, the household shopping was done by the staff or ordered by phone from exclusive stores. "The farmer's market," he repeated, frowning slightly. "I can have Maria accompany you if you need something specific." "No," Elena replied, with a firmness that surprised even herself. "I want to go. With Lucy. It's important to us." Their gazes met in a tense moment. Elena expected a refusal, a reminder of her new position that prevented her from mixing with ordinary people in a bustling market. Instead, Julian sighed and put the newspaper aside. "I'll go with you," he announced finally. "It's not appropriate for you to go alone." Lucy, who had been following the conversation in silence, clapped her hands excitedly. "Yes, we're going to the market with Uncle Julian. Can we buy caramel corn, Ellie, and squash blossoms for Maria to make quesadillas?" The girl's genuine joy dissolved the tension, and Elena couldn't help but smile. Even Julian's expression softened. "We'll leave early," he said, returning to his newspaper. At 9. The next morning was radiant, with that intense blue sky that makes Los Angeles seem cleaner and brighter. Lucy was ready by 8, in a yellow dress that matched her flowered headband and her overflowing enthusiasm. Elena chose a simple outfit: jeans, a white blouse, and her hair in a ponytail. She didn't want to look pretentious in the place where she had grown up shopping with her mother. To her surprise, Julian also dressed casually, dark pants and a blue shirt without a tie. Seeing him like this, less rigid than usual, gave him a more approachable, almost human air. The Santa Monica Farmers Market, one of the most traditional and colorful in the city, was bustling with activity when they arrived. The aroma of spices, fresh fruit, and prepared food filled the air. The stalls were overflowing with flowers, vegetables, dried chilies, medicinal herbs, and crafts. It was a vibrant mosaic of cultures, so different from the sterile, orderly world of Bel Air. Eleanor noticed Julian tensing up as they entered, uncomfortable in the crowd, with the shouts of the vendors and the constant movement. Clearly, this was not his environment, but for Lucy, it was an adventure, and for Elena, a return to her roots. "This way," she said, naturally taking the lead. "Mrs. Solis has the best flowers, and Mr. Cho has the freshest vegetables." Julian followed them, watching with curiosity as Elena transformed in this setting. The shy, reserved woman from the mansion gave way to someone more confident, who negotiated prices skillfully, who knew the vendors by name, who explained to Lucy the difference between a poblano and a jalapeno pepper with the patience of a teacher. "Did you learn all this from your mother?" he asked as she selected tomatoes with an expert eye. "Everything," Elena replied with a nostalgic smile. "Mom used to say that a good cook must know her ingredients like her own children. She could tell if an avocado was perfect just by holding it for a second." "And did you inherit that gift?" "More or less," Elena laughed, and that sound, so genuine and spontaneous, caught Julian's attention. It was the first time he had heard her laugh like that. They continued through the stalls as Lucy ran a little ahead, fascinated by the colors and smells. At a traditional candy stand, the girl stopped, mesmerized by the variety of treats: saltwater taffy, caramel corn, fudge, candied apples. "Can I get some?" she pleaded with shining eyes. Eleanor looked at Julian, hesitating. It was 9:30 in the morning, and she didn't want the girl to eat sweets so early, but she also didn't want to contradict her husband in front of strangers. To her surprise, Julian knelt down to Lucy's level. "How about we buy some to take home and eat them after lunch?" he proposed in a soft voice Elena had never heard him use. "You can pick 3 different kinds." Lucy's face lit up, and as she carefully selected her sweets, the vendor, an elderly woman in a colorful apron, smiled at the 3 of them. "What a beautiful family you have," she commented warmly. "You can tell your daughter got her mother's smile and her father's eyes." Julian opened his mouth to correct her, but said nothing. Elena felt her cheeks burn, unable to clear up the misunderstanding. Lucy, oblivious to the confusion, remained focused on her important mission of choosing sweets. The vendor continued, "It's rare to see young parents so dedicated these days. My son Javier barely sees his kids, always working. But you two look so close, and that's how a family should be." This time their gazes met over Lucy's head. There was something strange in that moment, an unexpected complicity, as if they were both participating in an improvised play. "Thank you," Julian finally replied, with a shy smile that transformed his usually serious face. "We try our best." After almost 2 hours, they had several bags filled with vegetables, fruits, flowers, and a few treats Elena had promised to prepare for dinner. As they walked to the parking lot, Lucy skipped enthusiastically, telling Julian everything she had seen, and surprisingly, he seemed to be listening with genuine interest. When they reached the car, Elena tripped on an uneven patch of pavement. One of the bags she was carrying tore, sending oranges, apples, and pomegranates rolling across the ground. "Careful!" Julian grabbed her arm, preventing her from falling, while Lucy shouted, "Crazy fruits!" between laughs. They both bent down at the same time to pick up the fallen items. In the rush, their hands met over a bright red pomegranate. The contact was brief but electric. Elena felt a warm current shoot up her arm and get trapped in her chest. Neither of them pulled their hand away immediately. For an instant, the bustle of the market, the cars, Lucy's presence, everything disappeared. There were only those 2 hands on a fruit that, according to mythology, had been the cause of significant destinies. Julian was the first to break contact, but he did so slowly, almost reluctantly. Without a word, they finished picking up the fruit and got into the car. The silence during the ride back was different from their usual awkward silences. This one was charged with something new, indefinable but palpable. Upon arriving at the mansion, as the driver helped unload the groceries, Elena turned to Julian. "Thank you for coming with us," she said softly, looking directly into his eyes. "It was very important for us. For me." Julian nodded slightly, not looking away. "It was interesting," he replied, and for a moment it seemed he was about to say more, but he held back. "We should do it again sometime." That night, Elena prepared chiles rellenos following her mother's recipe. It was the first time the 3 of them had dinner together without the silence feeling oppressive. Lucy chatted about the wonders of the market. Elena served the food with a newfound confidence, and Julian, though still reserved, seemed more present, more connected. When everyone had retired to their rooms, Julian found himself tossing and turning in bed, unable to sleep. He closed his eyes and saw Elena smiling as she smelled a marigold, or negotiating prices with a vendor as if she were born to it. He saw the light in her face as she explained to Lucy the importance of spices in cooking. And above all, he felt again and again the warmth of her hand on his, that moment of unexpected connection over a fruit as red as the heart he had kept guarded for so long. For the first time in years, Julian Blackwell felt fear. Not the kind of fear he knew, of failing in business, of losing control, of showing weakness, but a new and unsettling fear, the fear of feeling something that wasn't in the contract. October brought the first seasonal rains to Los Angeles. That particular night, the water fell furiously on the Blackwell mansion, as if the sky itself wanted to wash something away. Lightning intermittently illuminated the rooms, casting ghostly shadows on the walls, and the wind battered the windows with unusual violence. Elena slept restlessly, lulled by the sound of the storm. Since the visit to the market 2 weeks earlier, something had changed between her and Julian. Nothing obvious, nothing that could be named, just small gestures. He would ask her opinion on household matters. She would serve him coffee without him asking. Their gazes would cross for seconds longer than necessary during meals. A piercing scream cut through the night, startling her awake. It was Lucy. Without a second thought, Elena leaped out of bed and ran to her sister's room, her heart pounding in her chest. The girl was sitting up in bed, crying inconsolably, her small body racked with violent shivers. "Lucy, what's wrong, my love?" Elena hugged her, immediately noticing the heat radiating from her skin. "My God, you're burning up." "It hurts, Ellie," the little girl sobbed. "Everything hurts." A flash of lightning lit the room, revealing the child's flushed face, her glassy eyes, and her dry lips. Elena touched her forehead and felt it was scorching. Panic seized her, bringing back memories she had tried to bury. Her mother, also burning with fever, also complaining of pain, just before her heart stopped forever. "No, no, no," she murmured, hugging Lucy tighter. "You're going to be okay, sweetie. I promise." With trembling hands, she tried to remember where Sophia kept the thermometer, what medicines she gave them when they were sick, but her mind was clouded with fear. "What's going on?" Julian's deep voice echoed from the doorway. He was in pajamas, his hair disheveled, and an expression of genuine concern on his face. "It's Lucy. She has a very high fever," Eleanor replied, struggling to maintain her composure. "I need a thermometer and Tylenol and I don't know where." Her voice broke. At that moment, she wasn't the strong woman who had survived the loss of her mother and a marriage of convenience. She was just a terrified sister. Julian quickly approached the bed and placed a hand on Lucy's forehead, frowning. "I'm calling Dr. Evans," he said firmly. "In the meantime, we need to bring her fever down." Without waiting for a reply, he left the room and returned minutes later with a digital thermometer, a bottle of children's Tylenol, and a bowl of cold water and cloths. "Take her temperature," he ordered, handing the thermometer to Elena while he wet one of the cloths. "I'll put cold compresses on her." The thermometer read 103.6 degrees. Too high. Elena felt the air leave her lungs. "I gave her the medicine, but it's not coming down," she said, feeling tears well up in her eyes. "This is how it started with Mom, and then—" "Don't think about that now," Julian interrupted, placing a cold compress on Lucy's forehead with surprising gentleness. "The doctor will be here in 20 minutes. In the meantime, we have to keep her hydrated and cool her down." Lucy whimpered, squirming uncomfortably under the compresses. "I'm cold, Ellie," she complained, her teeth chattering despite the fever. "I don't like it." "I know, sweetie," Eleanor replied, stroking her damp hair. "But this will help you feel better." "Tell me a story," the girl asked in a weak voice, like the ones Mom used to tell. Elena swallowed hard, trying to remember one of the stories Sophia used to tell them on nights like this, when the rain lashed down and the world seemed too big and dark. "Once upon a time," she began with a trembling voice, "there was a girl named Star who had a special power. She could talk to the moon." As Elena narrated the improvised story, Julian changed the compresses and monitored Lucy's temperature, moving with an efficiency that revealed experience. "Have you cared for sick children before?" Eleanor asked at one point, surprised by his skill. Julian nodded without stopping his adjustments of the blankets around Lucy. "My sister. Her immune system was very compromised by her illness. We had nurses, of course, but I insisted on helping." There was something in his voice, an old but still fresh pain, that made Eleanor see Julian in a new light. This relentless businessman, this distant millionaire, had once been a boy trying to care for his sick sister, probably just as scared as she was now. Dr. Evans arrived promptly, an elderly man with a kind demeanor who, as Julian explained, had been the Blackwell family doctor for decades. He examined Lucy carefully and diagnosed a viral infection, nothing too serious, but requiring monitoring. Children can run very high fevers with minor infections, he explained, preparing an injection. This will help her feel better quickly, but you must keep up with the Tylenol every 6 hours and make sure she drinks plenty of fluids, Lucy cried during the injection, clinging to Elena with one hand and surprisingly to Julian with the other. He held her small hand in his, murmuring words of encouragement that Elena would never have expected from him. After giving detailed instructions and prescribing additional medication, the doctor left, promising to return the next day. The fever began to subside gradually. By 3 in the morning, the thermometer read 100.8 degree, a significant improvement. Lucy, exhausted from the fever and crying, had finally fallen asleep, but would stir restlessly whenever either of them tried to move away. "Stay," she would mumble in her sleep. "Don't go." And so, in the most unexpected way, Elena and Julian found themselves sitting on either side of Lucy's bed, watching over her as the storm outside subsided. At some point, the girl had snuggled between them, her head resting on Elena's lap, and one hand clutching Julian's shirt. The silence between them was no longer awkward, but the complicit silence of those who share a common worry. Occasionally their gazes would meet over Lucy's head, and in those glances there was something new: recognition, gratitude, perhaps even a deeper understanding. Near dawn, when the rain had turned into a gentle drizzle and the first rays of sun began to filter through the curtains, Lucy stirred in her sleep. Her forehead was now cool, her breathing calm. The crisis had passed. "Mommy," the girl murmured, still asleep. "Daddy." The words floated in the air like tiny soap bubbles, delicate and full of meaning. Eleanor felt something break and rebuild itself inside her chest. She looked at Julian, expecting discomfort or rejection on his face. Instead, she found an expression she had never seen on him, a mixture of astonishment, vulnerability, and something deeper she dared not name. He was looking at her as if seeing her for the first time, as if he had discovered something precious that had been in front of him all along. Slowly, as if afraid to break the moment, Julian extended his hand over Lucy's sleeping form. He said nothing, just left his palm open, a silent invitation. Eleanor hesitated for only a moment before placing her hand on his. The contact was electric, like at the market, but this time neither pulled away. Their fingers intertwined almost of their own accord, forming a bridge over the child who, unknowingly, had created a bond between them stronger than any legal contract. They stayed like that, holding hands while Lucy slept peacefully between them. They didn't speak. It wasn't necessary. In that silent gesture was a promise that neither of them had planned to make, but that both, surprisingly, seemed willing to keep. Outside, Los Angeles was waking up under a rain-washed sky. A new day was beginning, and inside the Blackwell mansion something new had also been born during the night, the seed of a real family where before there had only been an agreement of convenience. After Lucy's fever, the dynamic in the Blackwell mansion had changed. Breakfasts were no longer spent in awkward silence. Now Julian would ask how the girl had slept, and Elena would dare to comment on news from the paper he was reading. In the afternoons, it wasn't unusual to find the three of them in the garden, Lucy playing while they talked about everyday things. They weren't a conventional family, but they were starting to look more and more like one. However, as in any budding relationship, the first storm wasn't far behind. It all started when the principal of Greenwood Academy, where Lucy was a student, requested a meeting to discuss the girl's emotional adjustment following the recent changes in her life. Elena took the call and scheduled the appointment for Thursday at 10 in the morning. "I have a meeting at Lucy's school tomorrow," she mentioned during dinner. "The principal wants to talk about how she's handling all these changes." Julian put down his silverware and looked at her with a serious expression. "I'll go with you," he declared, not as a proposal but as a decision made. Elena was surprised. Until now, Lucy's school matters had been exclusively her territory. "That's not necessary," she replied, trying to sound casual. "It's just a routine chat. I've been to plenty." "I'm her legal guardian now," he retorted. "It's my responsibility to be present at these meetings." There was something in his tone, an unnegotiable firmness that annoyed Elena, but with Lucy present she decided not to press the issue. The next morning, the drive to the school was tense and silent. Greenwood Academy was a mid-level private school, not as exclusive as those attended by the children of Bel Air, but much better than the public schools in the neighborhood where Eleanor had grown up. Sophia had insisted on enrolling Lucy there, sacrificing a large part of her salary to pay the tuition. The principal, Ms. Albright, was a woman in her 50s with a kind but professional expression. She greeted Elena with familiarity, but her demeanor visibly changed when Julian introduced himself as Lucy's husband and legal guardian. "Mr. Blackwell, it's a pleasure to finally meet you," she exclaimed, offering him the most comfortable chair. "We didn't know you'd be joining us today." The meeting began with a review of Lucy's academic performance, which remained excellent despite the circumstances. Then the principal addressed the main issue. "We've noticed some changes in Lucy's behavior," she explained. "Nothing alarming, but they are indicators that she's processing many emotions. She talks constantly about her new family, says she now has an uncle who's like a dad. The other kids bombard her with questions, and she seems to enjoy the attention." Eleanor nodded. She knew her sister well. Lucy had always been sociable and expressive. "Have you considered taking her to a child psychologist?" the principal asked, "to help her process the grief for her mother and adjust to these family changes?" Before Eleanor could answer, Julian spoke up. "We've already arranged it," he stated confidently. "She'll start sessions next week with Dr. Linares, a renowned specialist in childhood grief." Elena stared at him stunned. It was the first she'd heard of such an arrangement. "An excellent decision, Mr. Blackwell," the principal approved, clearly impressed. "Dr. Linares has an excellent reputation." For the next 20 minutes, Elena watched, growing increasingly tense as Julian and the principal discussed Lucy's future. They talked about extracurricular activities, about a possible transfer to a more suitable school next year, even about the convenience of hiring a private tutor for English and math. Not once did they turn to her for her opinion. It was as if she had ceased to exist, as if her role as a sister and mother figure for 8 years had dissolved in the imposing presence of Julian Blackwell, respected businessman and a man with the resources to give Lucy the best. When they finally left the school, Elena was seething. She got into the car and waited for the driver to close the door before turning to Julian. "When were you going to tell me about the psychologist?" she asked, her voice tight with the effort not to shout. Julian looked at her, seemingly surprised by her tone. "I was going to mention it to you today. I decided yesterday after speaking with some colleagues who have children." "You decided?" Indignation broke through her last barriers of restraint. "Without consulting me, just like you decided on the private tutors and the possible change of school." The driver, sensing the tension, discreetly turned up the radio and fixed his gaze on the traffic. "I'm doing what's best for Lucy," Julian replied, his voice hardening. "She needs stability, she needs professional support." "I've been taking care of her for 8 years, Elena finally exploded. 8 years being her sister, her friend, her mother. And now you show up with your money and your contacts to decide her life as if I don't exist. "I'm not saying you don't exist," he retorted, raising his voice as well. "But we now have resources that you didn't have before. It would be irresponsible not to use them to give her the best." "The best according to whom? According to your standards?" Elena's eyes shone with tears of rage. "Do you think that because we signed a piece of paper, because we now live in your house, you can treat us as if we're part of your inventory? As if I'm just an addendum to Lucy's adoption contract?" Julian's face tightened as if he'd been slapped. "I have never thought of you as an addendum," he replied, visibly hurt. "I'm simply trying to help, to protect you both." "I don't need you to protect me!" The words flew out like projectiles. "I need you to respect me, to value my opinion about the child I've raised, to not make me feel like just another employee in your mansion when it comes to decisions about Lucy." The silence that followed was thick, charged with exposed emotions and truths spoken aloud for the first time. The car moved through the congested city streets, oblivious to the drama unfolding inside. Julian stared out the window for several minutes, his jaw tight, his hands clenched into fists on his knees. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer, almost reflective. "All my life I've solved problems with money and control," he said. "It's what I know how to do. I see a need, I find the best solution, I implement it. That's how I've built my company, how I've managed every aspect of my existence." He turned to her, and for the first time Eleanor saw vulnerability in his eyes. "But this," he continued, making a vague gesture that seemed to encompass their situation, their relationship, "Lucy, this is different. It's not a business I can optimize. And you're right, I haven't valued your experience, your bond with her." Elena felt some of her anger dissipate, replaced by a dawning understanding. This man, so confident in the business world, was navigating blindly in the realm of human relationships, just like her. "I just want what's best for Lucy," she said, her voice calmer. "And what's best for her is for us to make decisions about her life together, as," she hesitated, searching for the right word, "as a family, as strange as our situation is." Julian watched her for a long moment, as if recalibrating something inside him. "You're right," he finally conceded. "I don't know how to be part of a family. My experience is limited to losing one." He paused, visibly uncomfortable with his own vulnerability. "But I'm willing to learn, to consult you, to build this together." The car stopped in front of the mansion. Neither of them moved to get out. "The appointment with the psychologist," Julian said, breaking the silence. "Are you okay with it? If not, we can look for other options." It was a small concession, but for Elena, it represented a huge step. For the first time, he was asking for her opinion, acknowledging her role. "I'm okay with it," she replied. "In fact, Sophia and I had considered it before, but we couldn't afford it." Julian nodded, and a faint smile appeared on his lips. "See, we can agree on some things." They got out of the car and walked towards the entrance together. The silence between them was no longer tense, but thoughtful, like the calm that follows a necessary storm that has cleared the air. That night at dinner, Julian asked Elena what she thought about extracurricular activities for Lucy. The girl looked at them both with curiosity, surprised by this new dynamic, where her sister and her uncle discussed her options as equals. And at that table, amidst shared decisions and glances of understanding, something new was beginning to take shape. Not an agreement of convenience, not a paper marriage, but a true partnership based on mutual respect and a shared love for a little girl who, unknowingly, was uniting two completely different worlds. November arrived in Los Angeles, bringing with it those unique sunsets that paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. A phenomenon Angelenos call the golden hour, when the sun descends behind the buildings and distant mountains, bathing everything in a warm light that seems to transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. In the garden of the Blackwell mansion, protected by high stone walls and adorned with jacarandas and bougainvillea, Elena and Lucy were enjoying that magical moment. The girl, fully recovered from her illness, listened attentively as her sister read to her from a book of American legends. It was an old edition that Julian had found in the family library, and to Elena's surprise, had given to Lucy upon discovering her fascination with stories like The Headless Horseman and Rip Van Winkle. And so, the Native American princess and the European settler could only love each other in secret, for their worlds were too different, Elena read, her soft voice blending with the song of the last birds of the day. Lucy rested her head on her lap, her large eyes absorbing every word, every image from the illustrated book. "And they could never be together?" asked the little girl with that genuine concern that only children can feel for fictional characters. Elena smiled, turning the page. "We're about to find out, sweetie. Sometimes people find a way to overcome their differences when they truly care about each other." She didn't notice Julian's presence until his long shadow fell across the book. He had his suit jacket slung over his shoulder, and his tie was loosened, clear signs of a long day at the office. However, his face didn't show the usual exhaustion. There was something different in his eyes as he watched the two sisters in that almost idyllic scene. "Uncle Julian," Lucy exclaimed, jumping up to hug him, "Ellie's reading to me about a Native American princess who fell in love with a settler." Julian smiled, receiving the hug with a naturalness that would have been unthinkable weeks ago. "And what's your take on this forbidden love, my little anthropologist?" he asked, gently ruffling the girl's hair. "I think they should run away together and live in a cave," Lucy replied, with the confidence of someone who has found the perfect solution. Eleanor and Julian exchanged an amused glance. Since their argument after the school meeting, something had shifted between them. The tension hadn't vanished completely, but it had transformed into something else, something closer to complicity. A cave. Julian pretended to seriously consider the idea. An interesting proposal, but perhaps a bit impractical in the long run. "Lucy," Maria's voice echoed from the kitchen, "come taste the cinnamon roll dough before I put it in the oven." The little girl's eyes lit up. Cinnamon rolls, those sweet gooey pastries crowned with icing, were her absolute weakness. "Can I go?" she asked Elena, already on her feet. "Of course, sweetie, but just a taste of the dough, okay? Dinner is in an hour." Lucy shot off towards the kitchen, leaving behind the echo of her laughter, and a sudden charged silence between the adults. To Elena's surprise, Julian didn't retreat to his office as he usually did upon arriving home. Instead, he sat down on the wooden bench beside her, loosening his tie even further with a sigh of relief. "Tough day?" she asked, closing the book of legends. "Endless," he replied, leaning back and looking at the sky that was beginning to darken. A complicated merger, nervous investors, lawyers talking in circles. He made a gesture as if swatting away invisible flies. "I'd much rather hear about Native American princesses and lovesick settlers." Eleanor smiled, surprised by this relaxed side of Julian that he rarely allowed himself to show. "You know," she commented, seizing this moment of openness, "you've never told me anything about your childhood. Were you always so serious?" Julian let out a short but genuine laugh. "Actually, I was a disaster. My mother used to say that in a past life I must have been a hurricane," he confessed, his eyes lighting up with the memory. "When I was 8, I convinced my sister we could build a communication system between our rooms using tin cans and string. We ended up putting holes in 3 walls and knocking over a Ming Dynasty vase." Elena laughed, picturing a mischievous little Julian, so different from the controlled man in front of her. "And what did your parents do?" "My father wanted to ground me for a full month. My mother, however," he smiled at the memory, "my mother asked me to explain the system to her. She said that if the idea was good enough, perhaps the vase had been a necessary sacrifice for science. I would have liked to have met her," Elena said with sincerity. "She would have adored you," he replied, and the intensity in his gaze made Elena feel a sudden warmth in her cheeks. The conversation flowed with a surprising ease. He told her about his years at a Swiss boarding school, his first business failures, the time his father temporarily disinherited him for investing in a tech startup that later became a massive success. She told him about how Sophia taught her to cook mole poblano when she was 10, about her abandoned dreams of studying literature, about how she used to make up stories for Lucy when they couldn't afford to buy books. Time seemed to have stopped. The golden light gave way to the deep blue of twilight, and then to a night sprinkled with stars. The automatic garden lights flickered on, creating an intimate atmosphere under the bougainvillea trellis. "Thank you," Eleanor said suddenly, "for everything you've done for Lucy, for us." Julian looked at her for a long moment before answering. "I'm not doing it out of duty, Eleanor," he said in a different voice, softer, more real. "I'm doing it because I want to. Because you two, because you—" He didn't finish the sentence, he didn't have to. In the silence that followed, the only sounds were the whisper of the wind in the leaves, and, in the distance, Lucy's laughter mixed with Maria's cheerful voice from the kitchen. Their eyes met, and for the first time neither of them looked away. There were so many unspoken things floating between them, so many barriers torn down in these months of forced proximity, that it now seemed almost natural, almost inevitable, that the distance between their faces began to shrink. It was impossible to say who made the first move. Perhaps it was both of them simultaneously, drawn by a force as old as time. Their lips met with an initial softness that soon gave way to something deeper, more urgent. A kiss that tasted of revelation, of a truth finally acknowledged. Julian's hands gently cupped Elena's face, as if he feared she might vanish. She clung to his shirt, anchoring herself to this new reality that was being born between them. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless, as if they had run a long race or emerged from deep water. They looked at each other in astonishment, recognizing in the other's eyes the same whirlwind of emotions. Eleanor was the first to react. She stood up abruptly, a hand flying to her lips which were still tingling from the sensation of the kiss. She began, but could find no words to continue. Julian stood up as well, but he didn't try to get closer, respecting her space, her confusion. "Eleanor," his voice was barely a hoarse whisper. She shook her head, not in rejection, but as someone trying to clear their thoughts. Without another word, she turned and walked quickly towards the house, leaving the forgotten book of legends behind on the bench. Julian didn't follow her. He remained motionless in the garden, watching her figure recede as night fell completely over Los Angeles. He picked up the book and opened it to the page where they had left off, where the Native American princess and the European settler faced the barriers that separated them. He traced the illustration of the lovers with his fingers, aware that he and Elena, like those legendary characters, had just crossed a point of no return. The contract, the deal, the pretense of a marriage of convenience, all of it had been shattered by that one kiss that neither of them had planned, but that both in the deepest parts of their hearts had been waiting for. Eleanor barely slept the night after the kiss in the garden. She tossed and turned, replaying the moment over and over. The warmth of his lips, the gentleness of his hands on her face, the intensity of his gaze afterward. What did it all mean? How was she supposed to act now? At breakfast, she avoided looking at him directly, answering his attempts at conversation with monosyllables. Julian, too, seemed unsure how to proceed, alternating between awkward silences and trivial comments about the weather. Only Lucy, oblivious to the shift in the atmosphere, chattered away as usual about her plans for the day. When they finished eating, Elena hurried to take Lucy to school, relieved to have an excuse to leave the mansion. Upon her return, she saw a sleek, red Maserati convertible parked in the driveway. She didn't recognize the vehicle and felt a pang of curiosity as she entered through the front door. That's when she saw her. Tall, slender, with the kind of beauty that seems lifted from the pages of a fashion magazine, she wore a designer dress that fit her slim figure perfectly, discreet but clearly expensive jewelry, and a costly perfume that filled the foyer. Her glossy black hair fell in perfect waves over her shoulders. "Elena," Julian's voice sounded tense as he emerged from his office. "Good, you're back. I'd like you to meet Alexandra van der Holt." The woman looked her up and down with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "So you're the famous wife," she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "Julian has been so secretive about you." Eleanor shook her hand briefly, self-conscious of her own unpainted nails and simple dress. "Alexandra is an old friend," Julian explained, with a strange emphasis on the word friend. "She's in town for a few days and stopped by to say hello." "The old friend is an understatement, darling," Alexandra purred. "We were much more than friends for years, weren't we?" Julian's face tightened imperceptibly, but he maintained his composure. "That was a long time ago, Alexandra." The woman laughed, a sound that was melodious but calculated. "For some of us, perhaps. Others have better memories." Elena felt like an intruder in her own home. The discomfort was palpable. "I'll leave you two to talk," she said, trying to maintain her dignity. "I need to check on a few things in the kitchen." "Of course, dear," Alexandra replied with false kindness. "The kitchen things are so important." Julian frowned at the comment, but before he could say anything, Elena was already gone. In the kitchen, Maria was preparing lunch while humming a cheerful tune. When she saw Elena enter with a pale face, she stopped chopping vegetables. "Aye, child, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Something like that," Elena murmured, slumping into a chair. "Do you know an Alexandra van der Holt?" Maria's face twisted into a mask of disgust. "That woman," she lowered her voice even though they were alone. "She was Mr. Blackwell's girlfriend for years. Her family owns half the Upper East Side, old money, you know. Everyone thought they would get married, until she left him for some European tycoon. They say Mr. Blackwell was devastated." A knot formed in Elena's stomach. "So why is she back now?" Maria shrugged. "Who knows? But that woman is like a snake, always slithers back when you least expect it." She looked at Elena with sympathy. "Don't you worry, child. The mister has changed so much since you and Lucy arrived. I've never seen him so alive." But doubt had already taken root in Elena's heart. What chance did she have against a woman like Alexandra? A woman from his world, with education, money, connections, everything she didn't have. Unable to stay still, she decided to go upstairs to tidy Lucy's room. She passed Julian's office, where the slightly ajar door allowed snippets of their conversation to escape. "Frankly ridiculous, Julian." Alexandra's voice sounded exasperated. "A marriage of convenience to your housekeeper's daughter? What were you thinking?" "It's none of your business, Alexandra." Julian's voice was sharp. "My personal life hasn't concerned you for a very long time. Your reputation concerns me. Our families are still connected. Have you thought about what people will say?" "I couldn't care less." A disbelieving laugh. "Please, you know that's not true. You've always cared what our circle thinks." Her voice softened. "Listen, I understand you were lonely after I left, that you were looking for some kind of comfort. You have no idea what you're talking about." "Of course I do. I know you better than anyone, Julian. Better than that girl, certainly. And now that I'm back, now that my marriage is over, we could pick up where we left off, the way it was always supposed to be." There was a silence that seemed to last an eternity. Elena didn't want to hear any more, but her feet felt glued to the floor. "Things have changed, Alexandra," Julian finally said, but his tone wasn't as firm as before. "Have they really?" Alexandra's voice was silky. Are you telling me you actually feel something for her? That this isn't just a convenient arrangement? Another silence. And then, it's complicated. 2 words. Just 2 words that landed like lead in Elena's heart. It's complicated. Not, I love her. Not, I'm happy with my life now. Just, it's complicated. She crept away as silently as she could, feeling tears threatening to spill over. Of course it was complicated. She didn't belong in his world. She never had. The kiss, the shared moments, the looks, perhaps they had just been a product of forced proximity, of loneliness. Over the next few days, Eleanor distanced herself from Julian. She moved back into her old room, claiming she wanted to be closer to Lucy in case she had nightmares. She ate at different times, made sure never to be alone with him. When interaction was unavoidable, she maintained a cold, distant courtesy that contrasted painfully with the closeness they had developed. Julian, for his part, watched her in confusion. He tried to speak with her several times, but Eleanor always found an excuse to escape. I have to help Lucy with her homework. I promised Maria I'd help with dinner. I'm really tired, let's talk tomorrow. One night, as she was tucking Lucy in, the little girl looked up at her with those big, perceptive eyes that seemed to see past all appearances. Why are you sad, Ellie? She asked, stroking her cheek. Is it because of the pretty lady who came over? Elena tensed. What pretty lady? The one with the shiny dress who talked like the ladies in the soap operas, Lucy explained. I saw you crying after she was here. Elena tried to smile, amazed by her sister's perception. It's nothing, my love. Sometimes grown-ups just have sad days, that's all. Lucy frowned, unconvinced. Uncle Julian is sad too. He doesn't smile when you come in anymore, and you leave when he comes around. Her eyes filled with worry. Doesn't he like us anymore? Of course he likes us, sweetie, Elena replied, a lump forming in her throat. Especially you. Then why did the pretty lady make you cry? Why aren't you his wife anymore? The innocent question hit Elena with full force. How could she explain to an 8-year-old the complexities of a marriage of convenience, of unrequited feelings, of worlds that were too different? It's complicated, Lucy, she said, unintentionally echoing the very words Julian had used. Now go to sleep, it's late. What Elena didn't know was that the next morning at breakfast, Lucy would look at Julian seriously and ask, Uncle Julian, why did the pretty lady make my mommy Ellie cry? Julian's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Are your mommy Ellie? He asked, surprised by how Lucy had referred to her sister. Yeah, that's what I call her now, the girl affirmed matter-of-factly, because she takes care of me like a mommy, and you're like my daddy. But now she's sad and she doesn't sleep near you anymore. Is it because you don't love her anymore? Julian looked at Lucy, then towards the doorway, where Elena had exited minutes earlier, avoiding being alone with him. Lucy, he said finally, leaning toward the girl. What pretty lady made Ellie cry? That afternoon, Elena was organizing her clothes when her bedroom door swung open abruptly. Julian entered, his expression one she had never seen before, a mixture of determination, anger, and something else she couldn't identify. It's over, Eleanor, he declared, closing the door behind him. This game of avoiding me, of pretending I don't exist. It's over. She tried to maintain her composure. I don't know what you're talking about. You know exactly what I'm talking about. His voice was firm but not aggressive. Lucy told me she saw you crying after Alexandra's visit. What happened? What did she say to you? Eleanor looked away. Nothing. She didn't say anything to me. Don't lie to me. He took a step toward her. Something changed that day. We went from that moment in the garden to you treating me like I'm a stranger. I demand to know why. You demand? Elena felt rage replacing her sadness. You have no right to demand anything from me. I'm not one of your employees. No, you're my wife. On paper, at least. Exactly. On paper. A contract. A convenient arrangement. The words tumbled out. That's all we are, isn't it? Something complicated. Julian looked at her in confusion, and then a flash of understanding crossed his face. You heard my conversation with Alexandra, he stated. It wasn't a question. Enough, Elena admitted. Enough to understand that she's back and that you consider what we have to be complicated. Julian closed his eyes for a moment, as if gathering patience. What I said to Alexandra. I don't care what you said to her, Elena interrupted, though it was a blatant lie. You have every right to get back together with her. She's from your world. It's what your family would expect. You're just what? he asked, moving closer. The housekeeper's daughter you married for a piece of paper, she finished, the tears finally rolling down her cheeks. Someone who will never fit into your real life. Julian looked at her for a long time, as if seeing something beyond her words, beyond her tears. You are the bravest woman I have ever known, he said finally, the one who sacrificed her own freedom for her sister. The one who taught me there is more value in genuine affection than in all the fortunes of the world. His voice dropped to a near whisper. The woman who has made me feel more alive in these few months than in my entire life before. He took another step, closing nearly all the distance between them. I told Alexandra it was complicated because I didn't know how to explain to her that my marriage of convenience had become the most real thing I have ever had. That I kissed you in the garden not out of obligation, not out of loneliness, but because I couldn't keep pretending that I don't feel something for you. And then, without another word, he pulled her into his arms. It wasn't a tentative or careful hug. It was a desperate embrace, the kind someone gives when they're afraid of losing something precious. Elena tensed at first, but then, like a dam breaking under the pressure of water, she surrendered to the hug, to the warmth of his body, to the familiar scent she had come to associate with safety. They stood like that, holding each other in silence, Elena's tears soaking Julian's shirt, his strong arms wrapped around her as if to shield her from the entire world. They didn't need any more words. Their bodies, their hearts, said everything that needed to be known. Outside, the sunset was painting the Los Angeles sky with the same golden hues that had witnessed their first kiss. And inside that room, in the arms of the man she never thought she could love, Eleanor finally stopped fighting the feeling she had tried for so long to deny. December brought a characteristic dry chill to Southern California and a new air to the Blackwell mansion. Since the confrontation in Elena's room, something had shifted between her and Julian. They were no longer pretending to maintain a marriage of convenience. They now shared the same room, sought each other's gaze during meals, let their hands brush intentionally when they passed in the hallways. Lucy observed these changes with the satisfaction of someone whose long-held theory has just been proven. Now they're like my friend's parents, she had commented to Maria one morning as the cook made her breakfast. The woman had only smiled, grateful to finally see happiness in a house that had been shrouded in silence for so long. That Saturday afternoon, Eleanor decided to visit her old neighborhood in East Los Angeles. It had been nearly 6 months since she'd been back, since before Sophia's death, and she felt a need to reconnect with her roots. Do you want me to come with you? Julian asked when she told him her plans. Eleanor shook her head gently. I need to do this alone, she explained. There are places I want to see, people I want to say hello to. It will be easier if I go as I always have, as Sophia's daughter. Julian understood. In that humble neighborhood, arriving in a luxury car with a driver, accompanied by the tycoon Julian Blackwell, would generate an attention Elena didn't want. At least take Gustavo, he insisted, referring to one of the security guards. He can drop you off a few blocks away and wait for you. Eleanor agreed to the compromise, more to reassure him than out of any real concern. East LA might have a certain reputation, but she had grown up there. She knew its streets, its people, its unwritten codes. The drive from Bel Air to her old neighborhood was like traveling through different dimensions of the same city. From the wide, tree-lined avenues and mansions hidden behind high walls, to the narrow streets with brightly colored houses, clotheslines strung between balconies, and different genres of music escaping from open windows. Gustavo dropped her off 3 blocks from her destination, as they had agreed. Eleanor walked slowly, absorbing the familiar sights, smells and sounds. The call of the alert vendor, kids playing soccer in the street, the scent of fresh tortillas mixed with the spicy aroma of roasting chilies. Her first stop was the apartment complex where she had grown up. The 3-story building, painted a faded yellow, was exactly the same. In the central courtyard, a few women were doing laundry while chatting animatedly. They recognized her immediately. "Elena, mija!" exclaimed Mrs. Remedios, an older woman who had been a close friend of Sophia's. "Look at you, so changed, so beautiful." Soon she was surrounded by curious neighbors, answering questions about her new life, about Lucy, skillfully dodging the more indiscreet ones about her marriage. "Your mother would be so proud," Mrs. Remedios told her when they finally had a moment alone. "She always wanted the best for you girls, even if it cost her her own rest." Elena felt a lump in her throat. Her visit to the neighborhood was also a way to connect with Sophia's memory, to feel her clothes again. After saying her goodbyes, she decided to walk to the elementary school she had attended, now closed for the December holidays. Then she passed the bakery where Sophia used to buy the cinnamon rolls Lucy loved so much and bought a few to bring back as a surprise. She was about to head to the meeting point with Gustavo when a voice from behind her made her freeze. Well, if the princess returns to the barrio. Elena turned slowly, though she already knew who it was. That raspy voice, that mocking tone. The years hadn't changed him. Raúl Mendoza was leaning against the wall of a corner store, smoking a cigarette with studied indifference. At 35, he still had the dangerous charm that had seduced Sophia in a moment of vulnerability, the same charm that had led to their brief affair, from which Lucy was born. "Raúl," Elena said, keeping her voice steady despite the tremor she felt inside. "I wasn't expecting to see you." He smiled, a smile that didn't reach his dark eyes. "But I was expecting to see you, Elenita. In fact, I've been keeping tabs for weeks, ever since I heard about your good fortune." He pushed off the wall and moved closer, invading her space. "How's my daughter?" Elena took a step back, feeling the air grow thick. "Lucy is fine, and she's not your daughter. She never was. You made that clear yourself when you disappeared the moment you heard Sophia was pregnant." Raúl let out a bitter laugh. "People change. I've got a steady job now, my own apartment." His eyes narrowed. "And I heard the kid is living in a mansion with every luxury, that her new mommy married a millionaire. How convenient, right?" A chill ran down Elena's spine. The way Raúl spoke, what he knew. Someone from the neighborhood must have told him about her marriage to Julian, about her new life. "What do you want, Raúl?" "I'm her biological father," he replied, flicking the ash from his cigarette with a practiced gesture. "I have rights, and maybe I feel like exercising them now. After 8 years. Elena couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You don't even know her. You don't know the name of her favorite doll, what food she hates, what she's afraid of at night. I can learn." His smile turned calculating. "Or we could come to an arrangement. Millionaires are usually generous when it comes to keeping their families intact." The threat was clear. He was implying he would sue for custody of Lucy, or at least for paternal recognition, unless he received money. "Stay away from her," Elena warned, finding strength in her love for her sister. "I won't let you." Raúl took another drag from his cigarette before answering. "I understand your husband is a businessman. He'll appreciate a fair negotiation. Tell him to call me." He handed her a slip of paper with a phone number. "Or maybe I should introduce myself at that nice mansion in Bel Air. I'm sure my daughter would love to meet her real father." With that, Raúl walked away, leaving Elena trembling on the sidewalk, the crumpled paper in her fist and fear forming an icy knot in her stomach. During the drive back to the mansion, Elena debated with herself. Should she tell Julian about Raúl? What if he thought this had all been a scheme from the beginning? What if he believed that she and Sophia had planned some kind of extortion, using Lucy as a tool? The following days were torture. Elena barely slept, starting at every phone call, dreading the sight of Raúl at the mansion's gate. Julian noticed her change in mood, but she blamed it on fatigue, on nostalgia for the holiday season without Sophia. One night at dinner, Lucy made an innocent comment that nearly stopped Elena's heart. "Ellie, who was that man who gave you a piece of paper when we went to our old neighborhood?" Julian looked up from his plate, confused. "What man, Lucy?" "The one talking to Ellie when I was buying candy with Gustavo," the girl explained. He looked angry. Eleanor went pale. She hadn't known Lucy had seen her with Raúl. The girl was supposed to have been with Gustavo in a nearby store buying sweets while she talked to Mrs. Remedios. "He was no one important, sweetie," she tried to downplay it. "An old acquaintance from the neighborhood." But Julian was watching her intently, his dark eyes reading beyond her words. Later that night, after Lucy was asleep, Julian confronted Elena in their bedroom. "Who was that man, Elena?" His voice was soft but firm. "And don't tell me he wasn't important. You've been different ever since you came back from East LA. You barely sleep, you jump at every noise, something happened." Elena sat on the edge of the bed, feeling she could no longer carry this secret alone. "It was Raúl Mendoza," she finally confessed. "Lucy's biological father." Julian stood motionless for a moment, processing the information. "The man who abandoned your mother when he found out she was pregnant." Eleanor nodded, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "He just appeared out of nowhere. He knows about us, about the mansion." Her voice broke. "He threatened to claim his rights to Lucy unless Unless we came to an arrangement. Understanding dawned on Julian's face. He's asking for money, he stated. Yes. Elena could no longer hold back her tears. I'm so sorry, Julian. I should have told you immediately, but I was scared. Scared you would think that all of this, our marriage, adopting Lucy, that it was all part of some plan to extort you. To her surprise, Julian showed no anger or suspicion. Instead, he knelt in front of her and took her hands in his. Is that what's been tormenting you? He asked in disbelief. You think that after everything we've been through, I could possibly think something like that about you? I don't know, Elena sobbed. Everything is still so fragile. What we have, what we're building. Julian pulled her into a hug then, so tightly that Elena felt she was melting into him. What infuriates me, he said against her hair, is not that this man showed up. It's that you decided to face him alone, that you carried this fear by yourself when you could have shared it with me. He pulled back slightly to look her in the eyes. Elena, my whole life, I've been afraid of losing the people I love. I lost my sister when I was a boy, then my parents. I built walls, I focused on business, I avoided deep connections. His voice became a whisper. I never wanted a family because the risk of losing it seemed unbearable. Elena had never seen him so vulnerable, so open. But then you and Lucy arrived, he continued, and something changed. Little by little, day by day, you became my family, the one I never thought I'd have, the one I never dared to wish for. He cupped her face in his hands, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. I will not let anyone tear us apart. I will not let that man threaten our family. We will face this together as it should be. Elena looked at him through her tears, feeling for the first time completely safe, completely home. I love you, she said simply, the word she had held back for so long finally escaping her lips. Julian smiled, a smile so full of promises that Elena felt her heart might burst. And I love you, he replied, you and our little girl. And if I have to fight the entire world to protect you, I will. That night, wrapped in each other's arms under the soft moonlight filtering through the curtains, they made plans. They would hire the best lawyer, gather evidence of Raoul's abandonment, legally fortify the adoption. It wouldn't be easy, but they were in it together. And as Elena finally fell asleep in Julian's arms, she felt that something fundamental had shifted between them. They were no longer two people bound by a deal, by desperate circumstances. They were a family, with all its imperfections and challenges, but a family nonetheless. The fear was still there, a shadow in the margins of their happiness. But now, that shared fear was also one more bond that united them, one more trial they would face together. The official envelope arrived at the Blackwell mansion one winter morning. Just as they had feared, Raul Mendoza had followed through on his threat. He had filed a formal lawsuit seeking paternity and shared custody of Lucy. What no one expected was the speed with which the hearing was scheduled, just a month after the notice. It's a common strategy, explained Mr. Sterling, the prestigious attorney Julian had hired, to present himself as a repentant father seeking a second chance. Judges can be sensitive to that. In the preceding weeks, they meticulously prepared their defense. They gathered testimony from Lucy's school principal, reports from the psychologist she was seeing, and documentation of Raoul's abandonment since before the girl's birth. But at night, Eleanor couldn't stop thinking about the possibility of losing her sister. I won't let that happen, Julian would assure her whenever he found her awake, staring out the window in the early morning hours. We will fight this with everything we have. The morning of the hearing dawned grey and cold, as if the Los Angeles sky reflected their mood. Eleanor woke before sunrise and went to Lucy's room. The little girl was sleeping peacefully, clutching the rag doll Sophia had made for her 4th birthday. Oblivious to the legal battle that would be fought for her future that day, Lucy had continued her normal life: school, ballet classes, afternoons playing in the garden. They had decided not to tell her about the lawsuit to avoid scaring her. Why worry her if they could resolve it without involving her? Although Mr. Sterling had warned them that, depending on how the case progressed, the judge might request to speak with the child. Maria was waiting for them in the kitchen with fresh coffee and a breakfast neither of them could touch. Everything will be all right, mija, she said with the confidence only women who have seen much of the world can possess. That man has nothing to offer but empty words. You two are Lucy's real family. The drive to the family court building in downtown LA was silent. Julian drove himself, as if needing to maintain control of something on a day when so much was at stake. The courthouse was a grey, impersonal structure, filled with people with tense faces, broken families, feuding couples, futures being decided in cold rooms under the gaze of strangers. Mr. Sterling was waiting for them at the entrance. Tall, with silver hair and an impeccable suit, he exuded a comforting confidence. Judge Evans is presiding, he informed them as they walked down the corridors. She is known for prioritizing the well-being of the minor over biological rights. That plays in our favor. Turning a corner, Elena saw Raoul sitting on a bench wearing a suit that was clearly new but ill-fitting. Beside him, a nervous man who must have been his lawyer shuffled through some papers. Their eyes met briefly. Elena thought she saw a flicker of doubt in his, quickly replaced by that calculating expression she knew so well. Julian, sensing her tension, took her hand and squeezed it firmly. The courtroom was smaller than expected. Judge Evans, a woman in her 50s with a severe expression and wire-rimmed glasses, watched them enter without revealing any emotion. Raoul's lawyer spoke first, painting a picture of a repentant father who had made youthful mistakes, but now wished to be a part of his biological daughter's life. He insinuated that Elena was an opportunist, and that Julian was a capricious millionaire who bought families as he pleased. Mr. Sterling, with the calm of years of experience, countered by presenting the full story. Raoul's immediate abandonment upon learning of the pregnancy, the years of sacrifice by Sophia and then Elena to raise Lucy, the stable and loving environment the girl now had. "Mr. Mendoza," the judge finally said in a firm voice, "can you explain to me why, after 8 years of no contact, no support, not the slightest interest, you now desire shared custody of a child who, for all intents and purposes, does not know you?" Raoul rehearsed his speech about repentance and second chances, but under the judge's penetrating gaze, his words sounded hollow. "And you, Mr. Blackwell," she continued, turning to Julian, "what can you tell me about your relationship with the minor? As I understand it, you have known her for less than a year." Julian stood up. Elena had never seen him so nervous, the man who negotiated multi-million-dollar deals without batting an eye. But when he began to speak, his voice was clear and steady. "Your Honor, I initially knew Lucy as Elena's younger sister, the daughter of Sophia, who worked in my home for years. When Sophia passed away, I offered to legally adopt Lucy to prevent her from being separated from her sister." He paused, looking at Elena, and his expression transformed. "But what began as a duty has become the greatest gift of my life. I love that little girl, as if she were my own daughter. I know her fears, her dreams, the specific way she wrinkles her nose when something amuses her." His voice broke slightly. "And I love her sister, this extraordinary woman who sacrificed everything to protect Lucy, who taught me what it means to be a family." An absolute silence reigned in the room. Even Raoul's lawyer seemed moved. "I cannot claim a blood tie," Julian continued, "but I can offer something I believe is just as important. A home where Lucy is loved unconditionally, where her well-being is our absolute priority." Elena couldn't hold back any longer. Tears streamed freely down her cheeks as she listened to Julian lay bare his feelings with such simple, honest clarity. Judge Evans observed everyone present for a long moment before speaking. "Mr. Mendoza, biological ties are important, but they are not the only thing that defines a family. This court must consider above all else the emotional and psychological well-being of the minor." Raoul tried to protest, but the judge raised a hand, silencing him. "I have reviewed all the documents, the psychological evaluations, the school reports, the testimonies, and what I see is a happy, secure and beloved child in her current environment." Her tone hardened. "I also see a man who abandoned his unborn child and her mother, who showed no interest for 8 years, and who coincidentally decides to claim his rights just as the child comes to live in privileged economic conditions." The ruling was clear. Raoul's lawsuit was dismissed. Julian's legal adoption of Lucy was ratified, with Elena also maintaining her rights as older sister and guardian. As a minor concession, it was established that Raoul could have one supervised annual meeting with the child once she turned 12, if she so desired. When the judge adjourned the hearing, Elena and Julian hugged in the middle of the courtroom, heedless of the onlookers. It was the end of weeks of anguish, the closing of a chapter of uncertainty. As they left the courthouse under a sky that was beginning to clear, Julian took Elena's hands in his. "It's over," he said with a smile of relief. "We are now officially, legally, unquestionably, a family. We always were, Elena replied, resting her forehead against his. From the moment we truly saw each other. And in that instant, on the steps of a gray anonymous building in downtown Los Angeles, Eleanor knew they had crossed the final obstacle that stood in the way of their complete happiness. What had begun as a cold contract, as an agreement of convenience, had transformed into the most authentic love she had ever known. Spring transformed Los Angeles with blooming jacarandas and a renewed air that seemed to herald new beginnings. But nowhere was this renewal more evident than in the Blackwell mansion. The house that was once silent and solemn now vibrated with life. Lucy's toys appeared in the formal living room, children's books were mixed in with business reports in the office, and the aroma of home-cooked meals prepared by Elena replaced the sterile atmosphere of before. The walls that once seemed to enclose lonely memories now echoed with laughter and conversation. Julian had changed as much as the house itself. The businessman who once lived for his work now cancelled meetings to spend time with his girls, as he affectionately called Elena and Lucy. His severe face had softened, and he smiled with a frequency that surprised those who had known him before. "Where are we going, Daddy Julian?" Lucy asked that Saturday morning as they got into the car. The term daddy had emerged naturally after the court hearing, and though it had overwhelmed him at first, it now lit up his face with pride and joy. "There's a surprise," he replied, exchanging a conspiratorial look with Elena. He drove to the Huntington Library and Botanical Gardens, a place Elena had casually mentioned weeks ago as one of the favorite spots her mother used to take them on special occasions. The fact that Julian had remembered and planned this visit moved her deeply. The sky was that intense blue that you only see in Southern California after a good rain. They walked among the plant collections, watching Lucy chase butterflies with her inexhaustible energy. Finally, they found a quiet spot near a small pond where Julian spread a checkered blanket on the grass. From a basket, he pulled out a carefully prepared feast, squash blossom quesadillas that he had made himself, with Maria's help as he would later confess, fresh fruit, and fresh hibiscus tea for Lucy. "You made all this?" Elena asked, genuinely surprised. "The quesadillas are entirely my own work," he confessed with a smile. "At least they didn't burn, which is an accomplishment in itself." They ate amidst laughter and conversation, with the ease that only exists between people who have weathered storms together. They looked like a normal family enjoying a weekend, though their path to this moment had been anything but conventional. After they ate, Lucy found a girl her age by the pond, and after asking permission, ran off to play with her under Elena's watchful eye. "It's incredible how she makes friends everywhere," Julian commented. "She's always been like that," Elena agreed. "Sophia used to say that Lucy was born with a gift for finding light everywhere. Like you," he said, taking her hand. "You also found light in the most unexpected places. In a house where you felt invisible. In a marriage that began as a contract." A brief silence fell. Julian suddenly seemed nervous, a rare sight. His hand went to his jacket pocket. "Elena," his voice took on a more serious tone, "there's something I've wanted to ask you for a long time." He pulled out a small blue velvet box. Eleanor's heart skipped a beat as he opened it, revealing a platinum ring with a solitaire diamond that captured the sunlight. "Our marriage began for all the wrong reasons," he said, and to Elena's astonishment, he knelt on the blanket. It was a deal, a paper signed without feelings, without real promises. He took her hand in his, with a gentleness that contrasted with the image of the ruthless businessman he once was. "I want to fix that now. I want to ask you this time with no pressure, no fear, no contracts involved, to be my wife. Not for Lucy, not for convenience, but because I love you more than I ever thought it was possible to love someone." Elena's eyes filled with tears. This was so different from that first proposal, made in a cold office under the shadow of fear and necessity. "In this past year with you, I've learned what truly matters," he continued. "I've learned that the thickest walls can be torn down by a genuine smile, that silence can be filled with meaning when you share it with the right person." His voice, normally firm and controlled, now had a slight tremor. "I'm not the man you met, cold and distant. You changed me, you and Lucy. You taught me to open my heart, to live without the fear of loss." He paused, as if gathering courage. "So, I'm asking you, Elena Hernandez, would you give me the honor of marrying me, this time for love?" Before she could answer, Lucy came running back and threw herself at them, hugging them both with her characteristic enthusiasm. "Say yes, Ellie," she exclaimed, her eyes shining. "Then we'll be a family forever." Eleanor laughed through her tears, hugging her sister while looking at the man kneeling before her. Who would have imagined when she first entered that mansion as the housekeeper's daughter that it would end like this? Loved, valued, truly seen. Yes, she finally replied. Yes, I will marry you, Julian Blackwell. This time, for love. He slid the ring onto her finger with slightly trembling hands before standing up and kissing her. A kiss different from all the others, a kiss that tasted of promise, of the future, of certainty. Lucy clapped excitedly, jumping up and down around them, until she finally joined the hug, forming a perfect circle of 3 people who had found their home in each other. All around them, the botanical garden continued its course, tourists taking pictures, couples strolling, children running. But for Elena, the entire world had shrunk to that small space on a checkered blanket, where the once invisible girl had found her place, where the man of ice had discovered he could still feel, where an unlikely family had been born from the ashes of pain and loneliness. There were no more contracts, no cold agreements, no fears whispered in the dark. Only love, now declared out loud without reservation, under the blue Los Angeles sky that seemed to bless them with its golden springtime light.